Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hip Senior Podcast, Book Edition. My name is Marian Bailey, and I am your host. Today, I am with Bryant and Gayle Wolfe. They are the authors of the Caregiver Guide, What to Do When You Don't Know Where to Start. Grant and Gayle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. The two of you wrote this book, your mother and son, correct?
Correct.
And so tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you wrote the book.
To start off really quick is that back in August of 2020, my wife was in a health crisis situation. I ended up taking her to the hospital. Long story short, she was in the IC unit for basically 30 days, and then in a non-hospital environment, non-ICU environment for the next 30 days. And she needed direct care. And based upon that, I had taken a lot of notes. I was really over my head as a caregiver being thrust into it. Notes, 1 page of notes, ended up pulling over to basically the entire book and partnering with my mother and making sure that this information gets out to other potential caregivers, talking about how to be best prepared. And really, that's the key thing of it, is being prepared and not being overwhelmed and being able to take things on in a strategic thought process of how to be the best caregiver and most effective caregiver. I know my mother has some thoughts as well.
I'm a retired psych nurse practitioner, and whenever Grant was in the early days of supporting his wife in intensive care, he called and asked me to come, which fortunately I was able to do. I came up and I spent 5 weeks doing what caregivers do, and that's buying groceries, preparing meals, cleaning the house. One day the girls and I mowed the lawn, and another day we had to put the dog in the car and go off to the vet. So I got a very, as we say, up close and personal picture of what Grant was going through and how he was really struggling to manage supporting his wife, continuing his work, taking care of his home and his 2 teenage daughters. So that really gave me, I felt, an inside perspective on how to identify what caregivers need and then how to assemble and organize the information so that it would really be useful for folks.
So when we talk about, who your target market with this book, is it just caregivers? Is it family members? Who's your intended audience with it?
Great question. Really, it's everyone. It's anyone who is either a current caregiver or could be a caregiver. And I know in my situation, I was thrust into being a caregiver. I was basically sailing through life more or less, and all of a sudden this health crisis happened. And luckily, my wife, I made a full recovery. But really, to answer your question, it is really for everyone, because at some point, most people will need care in some fashion or another. I know my mother has a quote from the beginnings of our book and towards the front of it from Rosalind Carter that we felt important, at least to read off.
We really felt Rosalind's words captured where we were going with our book. And what she says is, there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. And we felt very strongly that this captured Grant's perspective that the caregiver guide is really for everyone, because life is fast paced and we just don't know what may be around the corner for us.
Could change at any moment, for sure.
100%. And not every caregiver is a caregiver of a senior citizen either. Sometimes they're caregivers of their children or siblings or whatnot. So it's important to look at it from that aspect as well, correct?
Very true.
Absolutely. We feel like we very broadly cover issues that caregivers experience. And in addition, we targeted some of the really difficult situations that caregivers can find themselves in. And as you referenced, a caregiver might find themselves in a situation where they are providing care for someone that they don't like. Not everyone ends up with caring, nurturing parents, but you may find yourself in a situation where you're the primary caregiver for that parent who really hasn't been very nice to you in your growing up years and as you've continued in relationship.
Okay. So somebody read your book. they set it down and they have one thought that they're allowed to have after reading your book. What do you want that one thought to be?
It's hard. I'll be honest. It's very hard to boil it down to one thought, but I'll try my best. And it really is preparation, making sure that the potential person who is going to be a caregiver to their loved one, whether it's their spouse, their aging parents, a sister, brother, maybe a close, very close friend or a neighbor, is really being prepared and making sure that in that preparation, you're educated, you have a clear plan of attack of what you're going to be doing, whether it's just getting through the next 5 minutes, the next day, the next week, what phone calls you have. A lot of people come away with caregiving as this one key narrow aspect of being at the bedside. What caregiver actually is a lot more than that. It could be really anything of just making sure that your loved one has the right appointments set up, talking to doctors, you're getting things arranged in a way and be prepared so that you're not overwhelmed. But another big thought to the book, takeaway more or less, is making sure that the caregiver themselves are taking care of themselves. So,
Right.
eating right, getting rest, basically taking care of yourself because it's not a sprint. It's really a journey. It's a marathon, more or less, to be that caregiver. You could be a caregiver for just a few months in my situation, or you could be a caregiver for the rest of that person's life. And you got to be able to pace yourself more or less. So again, it comes back to, in my opinion, being prepared. I know my mother has some additional thoughts around that too.
Yeah, and what I would add to what Grant has said is that caregivers need to remember to put their oxygen mask on first if they are going to reach out to take care of others. And that really is a theme throughout the book, that as hard as it is for caregivers to put themselves first, they really have to do that if they're going to continue to care for that loved one.
Like they say, you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Yes.
Very true.
Yes.
Very true.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Grant and Gayle, thank you so much for writing the Caregiver Guide. I appreciate all the work and duty that you guys put into writing this book. And I'm sure that a lot of people will find it very helpful when caregiving. So thank you again.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate the time.
Right. Have a good day.
Thank you.